Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are looking at a particularly fascinating snapshot of the commodities market. Let's dive right into the Turkey Polymer Bazaar for the fourth week of August 2026. If you track the flows of polymers through this crucial regional hub, you know the late summer market can be, well, notoriously tricky to navigate. Today, we're going to break down the exact price movements, the underlying market psychology, and the specific friction points that defined this week. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right into the data. First things first, let's establish our foundation. The data driving our analysis today comes directly from Polymer Bazaar and their core focus: price, prediction, and profit. Look, when you're dealing with a rapidly fluctuating polymer market, having a grounded, reliable source for cost and freight, or CFR, prices is absolutely vital. We aren't just throwing around random numbers here. We're looking at a meticulously tracked pricing environment. So keep that baseline in mind as we start unpacking the actual numbers. Before we get into these specific polymer grades, we really need to understand the weather, so to speak. What's the overarching atmosphere in the bazaar right now? Well, the macro market conditions for the fourth week of August are defined by three major headwinds. First up, logistical constraints are causing real friction. Moving material is simply not as smooth as it should be. Second, we're seeing persistently dull demand across almost all sectors. And third, because of that dull demand and those logistical headaches, buyers are choosing to remain firmly on the sidelines. They're watching, they're waiting, but they're not actively engaging. This sluggish, cautious baseline is the exact lens through which we have to view every single price movement we're about to discuss. Right, that brings us to our first major trend group of the week, the decliners. We're going to look at exactly how polypropylene and polyethylene grades took a direct hit. Here's our first major data point. Polypropylene, or PP, slid down to $1,070 per metric ton on a CFR basis. That represents a specific decline of $19 per metric ton from the previous tracking period. Now, you might be wondering, why did this happen? Well, it's a textbook reaction to the macro conditions we just talked about. PP prices were directly dragged down by those unbroken logistical constraints and a trading atmosphere that simply refused to shed its dull status. Think about it. When sellers are facing logistical hurdles and buyers just aren't biting, the price naturally compresses, landing us right here at $1,070. But wait, that $19 drop in PPP wasn't actually the most severe downward movement we saw. The most dramatic drops of the week hit the polyethylene, or PE sector. We witnessed a steep $39 per metric ton decline for specific PE grades. A nearly $40 drop in a single week? That is a significant shift, and it strongly underscores just how incredibly dull the purchasing environment has become. Buyers are simply not stepping up to support those previous price levels. Now, when we untangle the complex internal dynamics of the polyethylene market, we see it wasn't a uniform drop across the board. High-density injection molding, or HDIM, took that heavy hit, dropping $39 to settle at $1,089 per metric ton. Linear low, or LL, mirrored that exact same steep decline, down $39 to finish the week at $1,100 per metric ton CFR. But get this. Look at low-density PE, or LD. It's the absolute outlier in this declining category, actually surging upward by $34 per metric ton, reaching $1,290. So even within a sector suffering from incredibly dull purchases and logistical snarls, we have this sharp internal divergence. It's a brilliant reminder that broad market trends always contain granular exceptions. Moving on from the decliners, we enter our holding steady category, where abundant supply effectively anchored the market. Let's contrast PVC and PS to really understand this anchoring effect. On one hand, we've got polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. The bazaars were incredibly well supplied with both domestic and imported grades, but because demand remained totally dull, the CFR prices were locked in, completely unchanged at $780 per metric ton. Now looking at polystyrene, or PS, we see a very similar dynamic, but with a specific psychological twist from the buyers. Supply was abundant, sure, but buyers remained firmly on the sidelines specifically because they refused to build any inventories. They just wouldn't stock up. This standoff resulted in absolute stability. General-purpose polystyrene held stable at $1,630 per metric ton, and high-impact polystyrene was completely unmoved at $1,700 per metric ton CFR. The crucial takeaway here? This stability isn't a sign of a healthy, balanced market. Actually, it's the result of a stalemate between plentiful supply and buyers who are actively avoiding inventory building. Finally, let's talk about the outliers. These are the notable exceptions that completely defied the dull momentum of the broader bazaar. The prime example here is polyethylene terephthalate, or PET. PET actually managed to secure a $9 per metric ton increase, moving up to land squarely at $1,320 per metric ton CFR. Now, a $9 jump might not seem massive in isolation, but remember the context. Buyers are on the sidelines, demand is dull across the board, and logistics are severely constrained. Achieving any upward movement in this environment is incredibly significant. So why exactly did PET break the mold? It all comes down to rising production costs. The trading atmosphere for PET was just as dull as it was for PP or PVC. Demand didn't suddenly spike out of nowhere. Instead, the fundamental costs required to produce the material rose. This created a unique friction point where the pressure from rising production costs completely overrode the weak demand that was suppressing the rest of the market. It forced the final CFR price upward by that $9 margin. It's a classic supply-side push, dictating the final market price regardless of how sluggish the buyers are acting. As we wrap up this explainer on the fourth week of August 2026, I want to leave you with a critical, forward-looking thought. We've seen how logistical constraints and sideline buyers have depressed PP and PE, stabilized PVC and PS, and forced PET to rely purely on production cost hikes just to gain ground. The overarching theme of the week? Friction. So the absolute essential question to ask as we look to the weeks ahead is this: how long will these logistical constraints continue to dictate the bazaar's dull momentum? Are we going to see a break in the supply chain that finally revitalizes demand, or will buyers remain entrenched on the sidelines indefinitely? Keep that question in mind as you track your portfolios and watch the data. Thank you so much for joining me today to parse through all of this, and I look forward to exploring the next set of market movements with you very soon.